All right. The discussion tonight deals with narco-corporations, the GOP, and the midterms. That's the title of it. So what's the nature of this? Well, there's a couple of factors. If you hadn't had a chance to look at the video presentation that was listed in the email, it's from a presentation from the UAE, a global government conference summit. I think that happens now annually. There were three presidents: the president of Paraguay, of excuse me, of Ecuador, and of Dominican Republic. And they were there to discuss investments from the Gulf into their states, hydroelectric, industry, infrastructure, and so on. But the first question, not surprisingly, was on where do they stand on the Maduro extraction and the military intervention by the United States in Venezuela. And to me, this highlights what is so misunderstood in the American political discussion. It's the mainstream media, it's the brainwashing, but it is also, to a large extent, the GOP. The DC-controlled GOP, Republican Party, is very different. In some cases, it bleeds over far too deeply into state and county and local political parties and candidates. There's no doubt there. But the parties, the people in these parties that are conservative, Republican, part of this new MAGA movement, they're not in any way, shape, or form akin to this DC blob of a Republican Party. And it points at the main compromise. Yes, it's a question of immigration. Yes, it's a question of the border. And some of them now take a tough stance on that aspect. But it's much more a concentrated question of the drug agenda. Because what is the drug agenda? The globalist drug agenda is to basically addict, dumb down, destroy, and kill the population of the United States. That's what it is. And marijuana is the gateway drug. I know that's supposedly be some kind of uptight, prudish thing to say, but we need a lot more uptight prudes if that's the case. The reality is that we've seen a near total destruction of parts of our country that are just decimated by this drug scourge. It is a drug war. It's a war using drugs to destroy the United States, to break down its culture, to break down its family networks. And the many people and the many families, and I'm sure there are some even on this call. Oh, my nose keeps itching. There are even some on this call where once you get caught in the vortex of a family member who has a serious drug addiction, this situation is drastically different. The family dynamic totally changes. You're dealing with someone now with a near fatal disease or fatal disease that is uncontrolled, is unlike what they used to be like, that doesn't respond to normal family dynamics. And it pulls the entire family into a different kind of parallel world where you're dealing with a battle, a kind of kinetic war that's killing your own family members and destroying the family cultural dynamic. And yet you're almost abandoned. You have to fight it all on your own. You're isolated. And so it pulls these people away from the broader political fight. And then if and when they recover from such losses or the attrition that takes place because you're dealing with family members who are just, it's almost heart-wrenching, the problem you front is re-engaging into the political fight. Some people come in even stronger and hotter. Other people are just kind of broken and bruised by it. It's a completely different quality of war. There's a great and famous poem, I've referenced this before, from Solon of Athens in 600 BC, that he talks about the tragedy that enters a society, doesn't just simply enter it on the terms of, say, the Russiagate attempted coup of President Trump, which is certainly a kind of cultural tragedy, a kind of breakdown of our leadership, of our institutions, or the tragedy of COVID, the mass kind of psychosis of your institutions in society. But those tragedies penetrate into the very inner courtyard, or what we might call the family room of every American family. And yet these aren't the things you go around talking to people about. Oh, hey, my family's getting destroyed, or my son just became a drug addict, or my child wants to transition or is cutting itself in some kind of strange depressed state. We had no idea what was happening, and just or they went to college for a year and they came back totally. People aren't announcing the kinds of destructions that are taking place. But the drug scourge is at the underlying factor for much of this, the transgender obsession. I mean, once kids get on these screens on some level, but once you add drugs into that culture, where they have access to a completely different kind of culture or media environment, which is personalized for them by the algorithm. So you don't even really know, it's not even socialized what the kids are engaged in. You then add in the levels of drugs, disassociation, detachment, depression, uh, social distancing, that the imposed social distancing. A lot of the other problems are stemming from the drug use, that once you introduce that, it creates all other kinds of problems, not just for the individual, but for the society. And the secular materialist liberal, and I know some people, we had a great discussion Saturday night. I'll just introduce this as a question, but we discussed a third Christian renaissance. Some people are saying, well, do I have to be Christian to be Promethean? It's like, no, by no means does anybody have to be any religious practice to join forces with this kind of cultural and political fight. We make no other expectations, but there's a commitment to the quality of reason and creativity within the human soul and the human mind that we're fighting for, the basis of our country, basis of our Declaration of Independence. But when you look at the secular material outlook and the kind of liberal conclusion it comes to is on drug use, whether it's libertarian on the right or the kind of secular radical left, it is live and let die. You want to be homeless? Die. You want to get addicted to drugs and die? Fine. Who am I to say? Who am I to impose? Who am I to challenge you? Who am I to give you mental health treatments and drug treatments and get you off the streets and not let you die like an animal? Who am I? And in some sense, that moral shift away from live and let die, the famous Guns N' Roses song, but that is the liberal mantra. Why do we have hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of people drug addicted, mentally unwell? We've created entire NGO corporation entities called Homeless Incorporated, dealing with this festering growth of homelessness and drug addiction. And we say, but it's their right. We even encourage them to live homeless in the cities because the cities are where you should be. You don't want to live poor in some working class town when you could be homeless in San Francisco. So when you have that kind of outlook, we're essentially treating human beings like animals. There's very real reason to say, how did mankind depart from and advance to a level where human beings were no longer treated like animals? And part of that, without any doubt, was the intervention of Christianity 2,000 years ago. There's just a historical reality to that. That's partly why we're making these references, not because it's a question of what your religious practice is, but there is a question of how did our civilization advance and why today is it regressing? How do we pull it back from the brink? And that's really what this election is about, these midterm elections, what this revolution is about that Trump and MAGA are waging. So as I started to say, and then wanted to give some context, a lot of people had a big problem with Trump intervening to pull Maduro out of Venezuela. This is an aggressive step. Why is he doing this? There's no drugs in Venezuela. I mean, even Tucker Carlson, are you out of your mind? There's no drugs in Venezuela. When Chavez comes in 1999, he acknowledges the FARC, the Colombia cocaine, the army of the Colombian cocaine cartels. And now it's the National Liberation Army, or the ELN. But you have numerous of these groups, but those are well known and famous, and obviously highly connected even to Wall Street questions. We know there are Wall Street financiers who have embraced the FARC. When Chavez comes in 99, he immediately embraces the FARC, gives them public recognition, considers them a legitimate belligerent for the Bolivarian cause. So it was state-backed and support for the cocaine cartels in Colombia to run an attempted coup in Colombia, in political insurgency. And catch that question, political insurgency, the same thing that's being run in the United States today. So for the last 27 years, Venezuela has had an administration that was publicly supportive of the international drug cartels and helped them to grow, to give them state legitimacy, to give them institutional legitimacy, along with many of the Wall Street banks. There's no doubt there that this is a coordinated effort. The money laundering alone is highly documented. Wachovia, Wells Fargo, Hong Kong, Shanghai Bank. Many of these banks have been given slaps on the wrist by people like Attorney General Eric Holder in Obama's administration. It's an ongoing, perpetual problem. It is, as has been said, the cost of doing business for the banks. So Trump intervening was to deal with something that has been a festering problem for 26 years in the Western Hemisphere. But let's just pull out and look at the scope of this. If you take gang membership in the United States is approximately 800,000. About 25% of that is probably illegal gang activity, but maybe 40 to 50% is Hispanic. And all of the gangs, regardless of their ethnic origins, are directly tied in some ways to the massive narcotics flows. We know China has played a role in this. Mexico has been a major factor. And then central locations like the south side of Chicago have been literally a logistics hub. It's been documented in books by journalists. They're using apps on smartphones. They're doing delivery drops. Instead of having a guy in the corner, you just text the right app, use the right signal chat, and your driver will bring you the next bag. I mean, it's an integrated, almost like Amazon delivery-like coordinated logistics at a corporate level. And of course, the small guys, the small mules, are easily discarded, churned over, and they'll just recruit more poor peasants from Mexico or other Central American countries to operate this way. So there are approximately 800,000 gang members in the United States. There's approximately 200,000 in Mexico. And there's probably, we can say, between 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 throughout the rest of Central and South America. There is no doubt, by basic estimates, if you say reduce it down to the drug cartels themselves that operate in the Americas, their army would be approximately 500,000 foot soldiers. And of course, these are heavily armed. There was an incident in Oakland, California, a few years ago. My friend had a piano stored in an industrial area just north of the Coliseum. There was a marijuana grow in a huge warehouse, huge industrial complex marijuana grow center. It was raided with fully automatic weapons, full-on semi-trucks. It was kind of like a black ops special forces operation to break in, steal everything in the equipment for the marijuana grow as like a full-scale military operation in the middle of Oakland, California. So a 500,000 person army, certainly heavily armed compared to what you might think of as a guerrilla force. That is the second largest military force in the Western Hemisphere. Mexico's and Brazil's is about 380,000 soldiers. They may be better armed in some cases, but certainly the police forces and governments of Mexico and Brazil can't handle this. Totally compromised. The population knows it. They're not using the civic authorities. So why go through all of this? Well, one, what these presidents said, the presidents of Paraguay, Ecuador, and the Dominican Republic said, one, it was a shock, what was done to Maduro. It was a necessary shock. We're dealing with massive migration, and we're dealing with the narco trafficking and the narco terrorists. And we're trying to have peace in our countries. We're trying to grow. Can Ecuador get investments from the UAE? Can the Dominican Republic get investments from the UAE if they have hundreds of thousands of Venezuelan immigrants and huge narco trafficking operations and narco terrorist, criminal and violent operations? Can the south side of Chicago? No, nobody's going to. No one's going to be getting any major investments into areas which are riddled with crime, violence, and drug trafficking. This is what the anti-ICE protesters are really defending. But the core of it you saw over the weekend with the obsession of this Lion King video portraying Michelle as the ape and Obama as the baboon. Now, certainly it has racist connotations. There's just no doubt there. But the bigger question is why the media made such a big deal out of it. Because they want to make sure, and I'm sure Obama has insisted, including even his controllers like Valerie Jarrett and others, we've got to get Obama back into the mix. We've got to play the race card. It was the race card that essentially won Obama the 2012 election, and it's ultimately the race card that he used to kind of tear apart the country in his second term. We became an incredibly more racially defined country, where white people and white Christians are explicitly noted as the problem, the racial problem. You had this guy, Gene Wu in Texas, went viral over the weekend. We're now a majority. Non-whites are now a majority. We have to go after our oppressors, which are white people. I mean, it's still extreme. It's still insane. But this kind of thing has been building. And that is the Democratic Party playbook in 2026. Not because it will work. It may work. It's a cynical ploy. Cynical ploys in politics work. But that's not why they're doing it. They're doing it for the same reason that elements pushed the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th. The same reason why Obama, Biden, and Harris were threatening, and Zelensky were threatening a major attack on the Russian speakers in the Donbass in 2022, because they want more death, destruction, separation, violence, racism, ethnic factionalization. And they think they can win an election on that basis. And that becomes where we've got to continue to mobilize and have clarity and perspective. That's what I think. One, if you see the game being played, you don't want to fall into it. You don't want to react to it. What we have to recognize is that we can turn this. Part of this ploy, and if you watch Susan Kokinda's video from today on YouTube, you've seen it, that they are already doing tabletop exercises. They were already planning back in early December to focus and target on the Hispanic voters in Texas. Texas redistricted. They added 5 more Republican potential districts, premised on the Hispanic vote Trump got. Can they wear that down? Can they turn it into non-whites versus whites, that Trump is just a racist, that Obama's coalition can come back, the race-based coalition of Obama, with kind of simp whites who will kind of follow along, cucked, in support of this kind of liberal trash agenda? That's what they're going to try to pull off. And what's not there in messaging right now is the kind of explosion of investments, of manufacturing, of economic growth, but even the lies that there is inflation. When you do a commodity basket of goods of steak and chicken and pork and fruits and milk and bread and gas and eggs, it's a little down. It's not up. There's not been massive inflation. There wasn't 6, 7, 8% inflation. There wasn't 3 or 4% inflation. It's practically flat on basic every week goods to make sure people are eating and healthy and functioning to some degree. Of course, it doesn't include healthcare and college, but those have been out of control. But to keep, and probably if you want to stay healthy, you don't want to go to either one. So there's a kind of lie taking place, one of which was this extreme step by Trump on the boats in the Caribbean, or the boats in the Eastern Pacific, or the raid on Maduro. I had a neighbor confront me about the raid on Venezuela before it had happened. Just hysterical, a Trump voter, hysterical over the possible threat with the Armada and the aircraft carrier there, that we were going to invade a country. This was Bush and Cheney all over again. What did Bush and Cheney say about the drug trafficking? Oh, I don't think a lot. And they certainly didn't do anything to stop it. And they certainly didn't do anything to help Trump stop it once he came in. That we know. So the drug question is a scourge. It is one of the biggest issues of our time. And because of the way it destroys families, destroys the culture that it targets, but it comes with pinpoint precision targets specific families, it just takes them out of the communities, takes them out of the war. And it's not always easy to fight and engage in that. But the American people, the basic American voter, wants public safety. They want the criminals taken out, 4,000 taken out of Minnesota. Trump's been pushing this. He knows it's true. He knows people want law and order and safety and stability, especially in these inner city crime-ridden areas. And so the drug question, going after the drug cartels, working with these other heads of state, but the other heads of state know it. This is the second largest army in the Americas. It has to be shut down. Now, there's one more side of this that I want to address, and then I'll keep it short, try to keep it shorter tonight. In November of last year, November 20th of 2025, there was a former rapper, Pras Michael of the Fugees. This goes back, I think the case was charged in Trump's first term. He was given millions of dollars by a Malaysian billionaire living in China, a guy named Joe Lo. He's the guy that funded Wolf of Wall Street, or one of the financiers. He lives in China. He's basically on the lam. He's been indicted in U.S. courts. They were caught funneling millions of dollars through this rapper into Obama's campaign through small dollar donations, through probably ActBlue or some kind of election contribution platform where you can kind of just give names. You can use small Visa debit cards, over-the-counter debit cards that you purchase, gift cards, and you can make contributions on behalf of tons of people. ActBlue, the main Democrat Party platform for credit card contributions, is also under indictment because they were caught by James O'Keefe going door to door and asking these people, did you give $5? Did you give $18 to the Democratic Party, to this candidate? No. Have you ever voted Democrat? No. So part of it is also exposing, with this whole drug cartel operation, the election fraud. Now, Trump's on this. The SAVE Act is on this. The House just passed it. This would require a certain level of tighter election integrity, voter ID. Even CNN admits this has 82% support, 78% support in Hispanic communities. It's broadly supported. But there is something about going after these drug cartels, going after this operation that is not just about the drugs and public safety. It is explicitly about election integrity. It was known at the time, after Obama's 2012 election, that the drug cartels were operating in a similar fashion to Joe Lo and Pras Michael, the rapper, that they were funneling illegal funds into the campaign through this process, much like we've seen with the Somali welfare fraud. So I don't think that's a losing issue, but it's not a fight that we take up. And I think for the families and the destruction, the 100, 200, 300,000 people that die every year from this drug scourge, 1 million plus over the last 10 years since Trump won in 2016, we're talking potentially between 1 and 3 million Americans have died. 6 times what died in World War II. Then it's something that we should make an explicit part of it, and we should call it out that these radicals and these liberals doing things in Target and Minneapolis are essentially defending the destruction of American lives through this drug war. There's a moral standard, and it's also at the core level a base corruption of our entire election and cultural dynamic. So anyways, I wanted to contribute that to the discussion tonight. Hopefully people find that useful. And with that, I probably would like to hear from you guys and see what you're thinking.